your journey into the heart and soul of Greece. And now, member-supported Hellenic Public Radio Cosmos FM 91.5, a bilingual Greek-American radio program coming to you every day through WNYE 91.5 FM. From the Demetrius and Georgia Kaloidis Broadcasting Studios to the greater New York area and worldwide through cosmosfm.org. Our programs air Monday through Friday from 7 to 8 p.m., Saturdays from noon to 3:30 p.m., and Sunday mornings from 9 to 1:30 p.m. Ever ask what happened to the impact of Greek rule and culture in the steppe of Central Asia, the heights of the Hindu Kush and the Pamirs, and the banks of the Indus River since the death of Alexander? What if you discovered that the successor states of the region rivaled and may have surpassed those in the West? Join me for a special edition of Musical Masterworks with world-renowned historian and numismatist Osmund Bopearachchi for an in-depth look at the legacy of Alexander the Great in Central Asia, Bactria, and India. All that is next on Musical Masterworks Special Edition.
Ενημέρωση, πολιτισμός, ψυχαγωγία. Cosmos FM.
Musical Masterworks, a program dedicated to the rediscovery of great symphonic, instrumental, choral, operatic, cinematic, and electronic compositions from antiquity to the present, with your host, Mike Stratis.
Welcome. This is Mike Stratis, Musical Masterworks. Tonight we have a very special program, one that I've been waiting for a while to really get to the point and do it, and here it is. It is such a great pleasure. We have as our guest tonight here at Musical Masterworks Special Edition. And I also do want to say that when I say we, I want to also mention that on the line also listening right now is Esmeralda Marikis, my usual co-host on this. I do have the great fortune of having Osmund Bopearachchi, who is a numismatist, a historian, and archaeologist. For those of you wondering who is Professor Bopearachchi, well, he graduated from the University of Kelaniya in Sri Lanka and attained postgraduate degrees with honors from the Sorbonne in Paris. He's the adjunct professor of Central and South Asian art, archaeology, and numismatics at the University of California, Berkeley, and emeritus director of research of the French National Center for Scientific Research, and former visiting professor and member of the doctoral school of the Sorbonne. He currently serves as the director of the Sri Lanka French Archaeological Mission and also has launched a joint project with the Department of Near Eastern Studies of the University of California at Berkeley, focusing on Sri Lanka's role in ancient maritime trade in the Indian Ocean. He has authored 12 books, edited 6 books, published 162 research articles in reputed international journals. He has read 91 papers at international colloquia, presented 275 conferences in 80 cities, and he's carried out 120 archaeological missions in 24 different countries. His recently published book is When West Met East, Gandharan Art Revisited, and at present, he is working on a new catalog of Greco-Bactrian and Indo-Greek
coins. Now, without further ado, I want to welcome Professor Bopearachchi. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm very happy to be with you, Mike. Yeah.
I'm ecstatic. I'm ecstatic to have you here. For those of you listening, we are looking at the legacy of Alexander the Great on the region itself, and I speak of Central Asia, Bactria, and India. So, Professor, what impact did Alexander and Hellenism have on this region?
It's very interesting to know, first of all, that Alexander was in India. When we call India, it's really the Indus Valley. And
Right.
Alexander came to conquer the Achaemenid Empire, and he did it. And so he was in Central Asia and India between 329 and 326. And as all of us know, he died on June 10th, 323 BC.
Right.
But the story doesn't end there. Alexander died, but the Hellenism and the Greek presence in India continued until 20 AD, the Common Era. So
Right.
the long story of the heritage of Alexander continued with 48 Greek kings who were ruling in this area. So that's the first thing we have to take into account. And the other thing is that before the coming of Alexander, Aramaic was the lingua franca of the area. But after Alexander, the Greek became the language.
Yes.
If you look at the coins, you have the Greek legend. And even after the decline of the Greek power, the Greek was used by the Scythians, Parthians, and even the Kushans.
That's amazing. That
Yeah.
is truly a fascinating fact that we've replaced the Aramaic lingua franca
Yeah.
with Greek, and it remained until, you said 20 AD. That is quite.
Even after.
Wow.
Only Kanishka changed it, that is 127 CE of the
Right.
Common Era. But if you even look at the inscriptions, there are so many Greek inscriptions found in the gymnasium of Icanum in Afghanistan, the Greek city, and also in Kandahar in Afghanistan. And to what extent, even some of the edicts of Ashoka, the emperor, who became a Buddhist, and he had 3 languages on one of his inscriptions. One is Greek. So it
Wow.
shows that, the Greek was the dominant language for more than 300 years in these areas. And
That's
also the long-lasting thing is the Greek city planning, the grid system. The Hippodamia was very popular in India. When you look at some of the archaeological sites like Taxila and also Aishatra, Allahabad, this is long time even after the presence of Greeks in India. They continued with the same type of Greek city planning.
That is quite amazing. It really is.
I'm sure Mike will be talking about more, but this is something. And also, most important thing is that the Greek introduced the die-struck coinage. That means
Right.
using 2 dice and putting
Right.
the portrait of the king and also the name of the king. This was completely unknown to the Indians. Indians had what we call the punch mark coins. That means there's single punch, a symbol. But when the Greeks came in, they introduced the classical die-struck coinage, and it lasted even until today.
Well, Professor, if I may ask, since we are talking about coinage, and we'll get to a little more about it, but did any other peoples around the Greek and Indian world have any coinage that was similar to the Greek style, or were they all basically like the Indian pre-Alexander period coin?
No, they are all, of course, you have the Achaemenid coinage,
Right.
with the, of course, Greek.
The Persian.
Yeah, but the reverse doesn't have any type, right? So it's only
Right.
one-sided, and there is no legend on it.
Wow, that's a lot. If I may, Professor, we talked about the post-Alexander period, and I guess a lot of that is really the great achievement of the successors, what we call in Greek the diadochi, or the diadohoi in ancient Greek.
Yeah.
And how did they approach the native population and their policies?
It's very interesting. The Greeks were Greeks. They had their culture, but they made a wonderful effort when they crossed the Hindu Kush mountains. Hindu Kush range, which is about 800 kilometers long, going up to about
Right.
1,000 meters high. That means 25,000 feet. That was a barrier separating Bactria from India. Once you
Right.
cross the Hindu Kush, you come to India. So what these Greek kings did, they started the
Right.
bilingual coinage. So on one side, you have the Greek legend, and you have almost the exact translation in a language we call Gandhari or Prakrit, and written in Kharoshthi or Brahmi script. So this is how the first approach to the Indian civilization. So they talk to them and with their types in a language which is commonly used in India.
Yeah.
And also from time to time, I'm sure Mike, you know about it, the first depictions of Balarama Samkarshana and Vasudeva Krishna, these are, related to Krishna or Vishnu.
Right.
These images were first struck by the Greeks. A king called Agathocles, who ruled
Yes.
around 170 BCE. And also there are many other gods like Lakshmi and others. We can talk for a long time.
Yes, those are beautiful, beautiful statuary that really plays a big role in the transitional aesthetic that I have seen. And you've done a wonderful job presenting that as well. I guess before we get to the coins, there are some questions that need to be asked in terms of the longevity of these kingdoms, the Greco-Bactrian being the earlier one and the Indo-Greek being the latter one.
Yeah.
Why did they succeed for so long? What was it about these two?
It's a very interesting question. When Alexander died, normally the Indus Valley should have been the part of Seleucid Empire, founded by Seleucus. But the Indians were more powerful, like Chandragupta and his grandson Ashoka. They conquered the region south of the Hindu Kush Mountains. But on the north of the Hindu Kush Mountains, Greeks were there. So there are only two attempts by the Seleucids to conquer the power. First one was by Seleucus I. Second one was by Antiochus III. So when he came, he met that time the Greeks, after Diodotus, they have revolted. So Euthydemus was in power. Euthydemus says, I didn't revolt against you, but I killed the king who revolted against you. So that means referring to Diodotus. So they had a discussion, and Euthydemus sent his son, Demetrius, and they had a conversation. And Antiochus said, okay, I agree, you can rule, you are independent, I give you in marriage. So the recognition of the Seleucids, of the Bactrian kingdom, was very, very important. So they didn't have any enemies from the West.
So it's a very smooth transition then.
It's a very smooth transition. There was no war. Of course, the Bactria, the capital of Bactria, was sieged. But the siege ended, Antiochus III went back, and the Greeks were ruling. And on the southern part of the Hindu Kush Mountains, after the decline of the Mauryan Empire, Demetrius, the king, the son of Euthydemus, crossed the Hindu
Invincible. The Invincible, correct?
Invincible, that's right, in the inscription. Demetrius Callinicus. And so he went there. And then they were there for, as I told you at the beginning, until about 1020 CE of the Common Era. So they didn't have, of course, later we'll talk about it, how it declined. But that period, on one side, the recognition by the Greeks, the Hellenistic kingdom of the Seleucids, as a legal kingdom was a blessing for them. And on the other hand, there was no really rivalry from the Indian side. They didn't face any power until the end. And of course, it's different.
Well, I guess it would be a political vacuum existed that the Indians were not ready to fill because they were probably disconnected, from what I'm understanding, from the events taking place a little further south, correct?
That's right, yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I have to tell you, Demetrius the Invincible, Anikitos, as we say in modern Greek, he's one of those amazing characters that on the coinage itself, and you'll talk about this very unique presentation of Demetrius very soon. He really is, he stands out.
Stands out with, it's another way to answer your second question. He's wearing what we call the scalp of the elephant.
Yes.
He's a symbol of India.
Yes, I've never seen anything like that until that coin appeared before me. To have an actual elephant trunk extending from his crown, it really says a lot. It's quite unique to the region. So here's another question. Why is the study, I know you have filled in a lot of the gap, but before you filled in the gap, why was the study of this region, the Greco-Bactrian Indo-Greek region, so elusive? Why? What were some source problems that?
It's the same attitude. If I may, the real Greek historians of today, they have regarding the Central Asian Greeks.
Yes.
They are not very much interested. So it's the same thing in the past.
Yes.
Like the great historians like Justin or Polybus or Strabo, they were not directly interested in the destiny of the Greeks in these areas. If they talk about them, they only talk when they talk about the Parthians and the other wars. So that's the problem. So when we, as you know very well, Mike, when we write the Greek history or Roman history, we know even to the hour the history of the emperors or the kings or councils or whatever, because we have text. When you
That's
write,
right.
yeah. So when you write the story, the history of these Greeks, we don't have enough text. It's very
That's sad.
To give
Very
you
sad.
an example, if you read the names on the coins, we have 45 Greek kings. And if
Yes.
you read the text, we have only 8 kings mentioned. So this is
Oh, wow.
this is the reason why we call the history of the Greeks in Central Asia and India is a history of coins.
That might have been quite an epiphany for you to discover 37 additional names.
Yeah, exactly. And also I discovered another new name, 2 new names as well on the coins. So fortunately for us, on these coins, their names are given in genitive, like Basilios, Demetrios, not in the nominative case, but it's the property of someone. So if you read them, and we know their names. So
Yeah.
that's why it's very important to know the coins.
And how is the quality in the coinage and the imagery of these kings as well?
The quality is absolutely something. That's why people really like to collect these coins. At least the first kings of Bactria and also the Indo-Greeks, they have their portrait on the obverse, beautiful portraits, and the reverse. It's very interesting how they try to identify themselves with Alexander the Great.
Yes.
For example, if you take the first satrap of the Seleucid Empire who revolted against them, called Diodotus, we know it's a god's gift.
Right, Theodotos, right?
Diodotus. So, sorry about my pronunciation. Is difficult.
Oh, no. I apologize for my modern Greek interpretation.
So anyhow, so he has on his coinage on the reverse the thundering Zeus, the supreme god of the Greek pantheon, and for his successor, who was called Euthydemus. From the text of Polybus, we know he came from Magnesia of Anatolia, and there the Heracles was the hero. So on his coinage, you have Heracles on it, and it's not an accident, because we know the relationship between Heracles or Hercules and Alexander the Great. Yes. Alexander considered himself as the conqueror of India, and Heracles, normal mortal who became immortal. So they used the image of Heracles as a symbol, because he's coming from Anatolia, and where Heracles was very popular. So his son Demetrius, as you said very correctly, Mike. So he has this elephant scalp on the head, and on the reverse you have a standing Heracles crowning himself like Napoleon. Just to show that to the Indians, yes, I am your king. I can give you many examples like that. For example, some kings are wearing the cosia. As you know, this is
the Macedonian felt hat. Yes,
Alexander himself wore this, and you know the famous story that how the cosia, fell, and then it went to the muddy place, and one who saved it was, killed by Alexander, because he wore the diadem with the cosia. So it's quite an interesting story, because how they try to identify themselves with Alexander. Perhaps the most important coin, if you give me 1 second, is the 20 stater coin, which is in the French cabinet of the National Library, which is the largest gold denomination ever struck in the world, even until today, which is about 170 grams. And on the obverse, you have the portrait of the king with the horns and the ears of Dionysius. So it's a reference to Dionysius, who was to read Euripides, the theater, and we know that he conquered India and he introduced wine to the Indians. So again, I can give you many examples. I think I will stop there. But this is where you can see so many of these Greek kings try to, to present themselves as the real successors of Alexander. So this is where the beauty.
Professor, the beauty is not only on the coinage, but it seems it's gone beyond. People are now looking to those coins for suggestions to aesthetic. I'll be honest, a couple of days ago, my son, who's a big fan of this Hellenistic period, presented me an image of one of the Greco-Bactrian kings wearing the kafsia or the kausia, and it comes straight off the coins that you've seen. And I didn't realize that what in Greece and Macedonia is considered a simple farmer's hat has become a crown of authority.
Exactly,
it tells you so much. And then, of course, the role of Heracles and Dionysus, as you very absolutely stated, does seem to be a leading part of Alexander's quest to the east.
That's right.
And it's great to see that in the Indian world being verified. In terms of the continuity of this kind of coinage, how long did this quality in the currency making, how long did it continue until?
It continued until the very end. That means, normally the Strato the Third was the last Greek.
Strato the Third, right.
So that means somewhere around the 1020 of the Common Era. So the last 3 or 4 kings, the quality of the coins are not that good, but until the quality is absolutely wonderful. And also the one other remark is when you compare the Bactrian coins or Indo-Greek coins with the Ptolemaic or the Seleucid coins, the Bactrian coins are so different. They are so multiple gods depicted. If you look at the Seleucid coins, you have Apollo seated on the Amphilos, the center of the world. But here you have the gods identifying themselves with Athena, and also with Heracles, with Dionysius, with Poseidon. So many gods, almost except Aphrodite, the Venus.
Right.
All the other gods are depicted on the coins. So they are very, very different.
Right. The Olympian gods in their fullest creation. I did see that amazing coin, that large golden coin. And if I'm not mistaken, it's the one with the chariot, right? And there's like a symbol, there's a god in one of them with like almost like Helios with the rays extending out of his head. Is that the one?
No, this is a coin of Eucratides. He has this helmet. On the helmet, you have the horns and the ears. And on the rears, you have the Dioscuri.
Oh, okay, the Dioscuri, wow.
Castor and Pollux on it.
Yeah.
And, so they are riding, and also, they gain the relationship with one of them is the son of Zeus, the supreme god. So it's always, if you look at the coins, there's always a reference to the Greek gods, Greek pantheon.
That says a lot. And how does the native population feel about these cultural changes?
I think they accepted because, the reason why I say they were accepted is you can't imagine the number of coins that you find in these regions. I don't know whether you heard about my work on Mir Saka, which was a deposit which contained 4 tons of coins. And out of 4 tons, there were at least 2 tons of Greek coins in it. And also every day we find a new treasure, a new hoard.
Wow.
Thousands and thousands of coins. And also it's not the number, and the number of dies, with the obverse die, you can mint about 20,000 coins. So can you imagine the number of production? That means the native accepted them. And the other thing is that they of course, they can read the name of the king because it's written in their own language, not only in Greek. It's quite interesting. There was a demand. Just to give you an example, these coins were in circulation until the 19th century because you get the overstrikes of these coins. Not that they knew anything about the Greeks who ruled there, but the quality of the silver and the quality of the gold is so good. Sometimes we did the analysis of the silver. It's quite pure silver. It's about 95%, and the gold is about 98% pure.
That is very high level.
Very high level of purity. So even people can't remember the king who issued them, but they respected the quality of the coins because they are of good silver and good gold.
That says a lot about the quality. Yeah.
Exactly.
And am I correct in assuming that you went through those 2 tons of coins to take a look at them? That's a lot of work.
I did.
Oh,
I did
wow.
means, very rapidly. It's a long story. We should, right. But there were really 4 tons of coins in a way.
That's a
Yeah,
lot.
so it's
That is
really-
amazing to find that.
Yeah.
Wow. And since we're talking about the appearance of the Greek language on the coins, how did the linguistic issue, was there a linguistic issue between the government and the governed there? Did you find any acceptance of Greek among the locals? I mean, was this like the new lingua franca, as you said before, for this time period?
I think the good thing about it is that you have the Greek legend and the Kharoshthi or the Brahmi, which is we call the Gandhari on the rivers. So they knew, they respected their language. And also, Mike, I think towards the end, they all became Buddhist or Hindus. We have absolute evidence. There's a person called Heliodorus, and there's an inscription right in the middle of India called Vesnagari in Vidisha. He says he's the ambassador of the Greek king called Antiochus, who was ruling in Taxila, and he said, "I'm from Taxila, and I became a Hindu. I am a Bhagavat cult. That means he is believing in Vishnu." So this is one example, and also I give you another one in this recent book that you kindly mentioned. I have published a new stupa, this Buddhist monument, and there are 3 names on this, and one is Greek, is Soilus.
On the stupa?
On the stupa, and you have one is a Scythian, one is Indian, other one is a Greek. So that means most of these Greeks were, they mixed up with the local community. Towards the end, and they became Buddhist or Hindu, and that's why I don't know whether we'll have time, Mike. But if we talk about the Gandharan art, we can see this inspiration of the Greek art on them.
If we can, I would love to go back and explain also the significance of the stupa, because that's something I think many people are not aware of. I think that leads me to the next question, and talk about the cultural exchange between the Greek world and the Indian world in terms of religion. And we know for a fact that Alexander the Great had in his immediate circle an amazing Jainist, I would assume he was a Jainist priest, who was given the Greek name Kalanos.
Yes.
Since that time, the fascination of the Greek world with the Indian world has continued into the reign of the very special king, Menander I Sotir, or the Savior, who is known as Melinda to the native Indians. Can you explain about this important personality?
It's quite interesting. He's known as Milinda in the Pali and Chinese texts, so we believe it is Menander. He was the biggest Indo-Greek king of the whole dynasty because he has so many coins and so many types, and he's also mentioned in the Greek text. I'll come to that. So unfortunately, the original text is lost, which was in Sanskrit, but we have got 2 translations. One is Chinese, and the other one is Pali. You believe it or not, one of the reasons why I come from Sri Lanka, it was found in Sri Lanka, the Pali translation. So in the Pali translation, what we call the Milinda Panya, at the end he became a Buddhist. Right. But in the Chinese text, he doesn't become a Buddhist, but he says he died in the battlefield. This is coming from Polybus, saying that from Plutarch. This was when a certain man named Menander, who had been a good king of Bactrians, died in camp, and the city celebrated his funeral as usual in other respects, but in respect of his remains, they put forth rival claims, and only with difficulty came in terms agreeing that they should divide the ashes. So this is very interesting, right? Because when Buddha passed away, the cities fought to get the ashes.
For the ashes?
Yeah, for the ashes, and they built the stupas. And
that is something.
The same story, it is not written by an Indian, but it's Plutarch, who is a serious historian.
Very.
Of the beginning of the Christian era. Right. And he says he was so well accepted by the community, they wanted his ash. That means they also made stupas or some sort of a monument in his honor. So even if he didn't become a Buddhist, but he really The Buddhists took refuge in his kingdom because that was a period the Sunda Empire was rising and it was a Hindu empire. So they came to Gandhara, and a region where Hindu was powerful. And sometime later, 100 years later, where the Gandhara Nath was born. So Milinda is very interesting, and
Very.
yeah. And if you read the dialogue between Nagasena, the Buddhist monk, and the Greek king Milinda, it's almost a Platonic discussion.
Wow. For those of you just joined us, we have Professor Osmund Bopearachchi here on the Musical Masterwork Special Edition. And we just talked about this very important personality, Menander I Sotir, also known as Melinda. And you specified that the Chinese version is a bit different from the Indian version. Is there any kind of a motivation for not mentioning that?
Yeah, I think the people believe the Chinese version is the true translation of the Sanskrit text, which is lost. The Pali version, which was found in Sri Lanka or Ceylon, there are two parts. The first part is the real translation of the Sanskrit text, and the second part was added in the 5th century by the Buddhist monks of Sri Lanka.
Oh, I see. That's the later introduction.
Yeah, so I wrote a long paper on that. To prove, there's no reason to believe that he became a Buddhist. He stayed as a Greek and he died in the battlefield. But he was a good king. He was a good king. That's why people liked him. And if people fight for your ash, when I'm sure nobody's going to fight for our ash. But
oh, let's not get that dark now, Professor. Fighting for the ashes of this poor man. And I guess it ended up in a stupa somewhere, right?
That's right, exactly. So they don't say exactly, but there's another description in a Pali text, originally from Sri Lanka, called Digha Nikaya. It explains exactly the same thing. When Buddha passed away, he was cremated, the body was cremated, and 8 kingdoms fought against the Kusina Nagara, the place where he died, asking for ash, and they took the ash and they built up stupas. So it's a very interesting, it's not that innocent when you say that the conversation with Nagasena, the Buddhist monk, and Menander giving refuge to the Buddhists. So it's something, again, to answer your question, this is where you see how the Greeks knew to be good to the local people.
Yes, that's a big statement.
Yes,
to be aware of their interests and their needs. One more thing, Professor, before I go to the next question. I noticed on the coin of Menander that he wears the royal band around his head, the ribbon.
Yeah.
And is that something unique to him on the coinage, or is that something you find on many of the kings that you found?
You find on all the Bactrian coins.
Okay.
The diadem, which was almost purple color, which Alexander was wearing that, and it came from the Persians. Very curious. The Persians had this band called the diadem.
Persians.
Yeah. And so this became the one who had the diadem was the king.
Right.
All people didn't have the right to wear it.
Professor, having talked about the importance of Greek culture on the region itself, I'd like to know what was the influence on the aesthetic transition that is called Gandharan art, and from your achievement in the studies and your archaeological finds, how credible it was this transformation that it affected everything?
Yeah, people have written about it. With the French scholar called Alfred Fouché, he's the one who really called the Gandharan art Greco-Buddhist art, Greek art. The reason is there are so many Greek motifs in the Gandharan art. So let me summarize it very briefly. The Greek power came to an end somewhere around the 20 of the Common Era. And then immediately, there were Indo-Scythians and Indo-Parthians, and the Kushans came to power. The beginning of the Kushan Empire, the Kanishka, it is 127. So this is the period where Gandharan art really was born. So we call it some sort of a reminiscence of the Greek art. The reason, there are many ways to analyze it. We need hours and hours, but I'll be very brief about it. The first thing is the depiction of the Buddha in an anthropomorphic way. That means in a human body. Until then, in the Indian art, he was never represented in a human form. So only by symbols like the throne or the sacred Bodhi tree or the footprints. So for the Greeks to represent their gods in human form was not a problem. I mean, we have Zeus, we have Aphrodite, we have everyone in human form. So this is the way how the Buddha, or some say it's directly coming. They took Apollo, the most beautiful god in the Greek mythology, and depicted Buddha. So apart from that, and also the narrations, the way the story of the Buddha is narrated. So you have scene by scene, from the birth to until his death, and also the distribution of his relics. So the scenes are divided by the Corinthian, by the columns surmounted by Corinthian capitals, right? So that's one thing. And again, for example, we were talking about Heracles. He was very popular, and he was integrated into the Gandharan Buddhist art, as we call him Vajrapani, the one who has the Vajra or the thunderbolt. Right? The Heracles should have a club. But here, there are some depictions where he has both the club and the thunderbolt. But in modern art, he is absolutely like Heracles, like Heracles in Hellenistic art. But he is there to protect the Buddha. But when you look at the other forms of art, there are the Buddhist art, like in Mathura, Sanchi, and Andhra, you don't get Heracles. You don't get Vajra. Only.
Why would that be?
Because of the inspiration of in that period, the Greeks were still there, although they were not dominant. They were not ruling, but the Greeks were there, and they have connections with Greek. So they thought he is wonderful, and he is not the only one. And also, for example, this city goddess, the Tyche, was, and his iconography holding the cornucopia, the of abundance, and it is applied to Hariti, who is a Buddhist goddess. The Hariti was a yaksha. Yaksha means some sort of a demoniac spirit who had 1,000 kids, and he killed other humans to feed her children. So people went and complained to Buddha, if she is killing our children. So what Buddha did was took the youngest one and hid him in his bowl. And she went crazy and looking after the child, and to Buddha and said, I lost my youngest. And Buddha said, you have 999 children, and you are only one is missing, but you killed the unique children of the other people. So she became a wonderful person, and she became some sort of a mother goddess. Now, I told the story is very important because to depict this personality, this important, the demon who became a protector of children, they took the Tyche, the city goddess, and with a cornucopia. So the inspiration is absolutely Greek, but the story is Indian. So same thing with Dionysus. If you look at some of the stupas, you have the scenes how to make wine, because in Bactria they had wine, grape wine. So they cultivate grapes. They have the fermentation. They're trampling of the wine, fermentation, drinking, having luxurious life. So even these things were in the art. So it's very interesting combination of explaining to the Greeks, newly converted to Buddhism. There is something called notion of paradise in between. So it's a very nice, Gandharan art is a very nice way of pointing to the fact since the Greeks were there for more than 300 years, their art, you have Greek sculptures and other things, it remained.
Yes.
Which is not the case with the other schools of Buddhist art.
That says a lot. That says a lot, that the appreciation for the Greek tradition there was so strong that it lasted. And I'll be honest, I've seen those beautiful pieces that you presented on the stupas, and it's in some ways they seem to have a quality that I find in late Roman marbles statuary, and where you have these intricate scenes of many personalities, and there in one little corner, sitting down with the club and a lightning bolt, is Hercules or Heracles. It really says a lot. about the cultural diffusion that took place. I do have one question before we go to the break.
Yeah.
Are Indians interested still in winemaking?
Yes, of course. Yes, I mean, India, they have started producing good wine in Maharashtra and other places. I have had, I love wine, and I had those wines. They're not that bad, but the tradition continued in Bactria in Afghanistan. They still cultivate in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan. They still cultivate grapes. In Afghanistan, of course, you can have alcohol, but in Uzbekistan, people distill alcohol, and they, of course, the fermentation of wine. So they still make wine,
even though there may be religious prohibitions in some cases. Correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, but
that's a great. That's another legacy of Alexander, right there. The winemaking. It's a great story. Professor, stay where you are. We're going to be back after the news from Greece and a brief community announcements.
Κόσμος FM, το ελληνικό κοινοφελές ραδιόφωνο.
And welcome back to Musical Masterworks for our final portion of the night, a fascinating conversation with Professor Osmund Bopearachchi, who has talked about the amazing legacy of Alexander the Great in the region. We've talked about the political and social and cultural aspects, as well as some of the linguistic and religious aspects. Professor, what else can we say about this legacy of Alexander the Great in the region?
Not to be said, the fundamental question about Alexander is that the region where he was, it is today's Pakistan. He never went to today's India. But those days it was the India. Any region south of the Hindu Kush Mountains considered as part of India, although the geographic things shifted. But if you look at the people, some people say, I'm sure you have heard about this, and they claim that they are the descendants of Alexander.
Yes, the Kalash.
The Kalash, the slopes of Himalaya. I don't know how far this is true or not. But and also the name like Sikandar, which is the name for Alexander. And also a number of movies made of Alexander. It's very interesting. On the other day, I was invited to give a talk. And then before the talk, they showed this movie, which I haven't seen, made in 1950s. About black and white movie on Alexander the Great. You can criticize about the way how the things are made. Alexander wears almost a Mughal and not the Macedonian dress. But this is interesting question again. A foreigner coming to India and conquering India and going back, and his legacy continued for years and years and years. So in daily life, you look at certain things, as I said, the bilingual coinage, the dry stock coinage, even theater. So much is left in these places, especially in Pakistan. You can't avoid it. You can't just say no. I want to ignore it. No, especially in Afghanistan, you may have heard about the Jalalabad Hatta. Those sculptures are so realistic. The famous archaeologist and art historian called John Boardman said they are as beautiful as the Greek classical art. So that's something which is absolutely interesting to realize. So the legacy continues in India in different ways. So people can, of course, like history, things get deformed and things are added. But the Alexander is known. I think everybody would know about Alexander and his conquest of Indian territories.
But Professor, you would agree with me in saying that while Alexander was that amazing personality that left a name for a short period of time, it really was the hard work of the successor states, the great kings of the Greco-Bactrian and Indo-Greek kingdom that made the difference, right?
Absolutely, yes. He was 3 years. And as you know, he died very young. And so this interesting thing is, Mike, that Alexander almost continued the Achaemenid way of governing. That means have satraps. So he put
Right.
garrisons and small armies, and he, for example, when he had the battle with Porus, the Indian king on the elephants, with 250 elephants, Porus was defeated, but he gave the kingdom to Porus.
Yes, the respect he had for him. That's correct.
And also the same thing with Ambi, or the Taxila, the prince of Taxila.
Yes,
and gave
Ambi
the kingdom to him and went away. So it is there. I mean, that type of shrewd way of doing it to govern the country. But it is not enough. And if these satraps didn't take power, especially Diodorus, if he didn't take power and created the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, the discussion we had today would have been we can't talk about it because it must.
That's right.
So it's as you very correctly said, it's thanks to those 40 odd kings who ruled in the regions, who knew how to govern with the local population. It is not easy. On the north of the Hindu Kush, people were more Greek oriented. South of the Hindu Kush, they didn't know any Greek. They had their own local language, but still they could rule there for 200 years.
Yes.
So it should be, yeah.
And thanks to you, Professor, those successors, those great kings, those 45 kings that you've uncovered have gotten their great moment.
Yeah.
And it's a big thank you to you for everything you've done. Is there anything you've got planned in the future?
We are planning to have an exhibition on Gandharan art in Berkeley Museum. It was planned for October, but because of the new situation, we had to postpone it until April 29th. It will be followed by talks and also a colloquium, what we call a conference, with the world experts on Gandharan art. So it will go on for 2 days, and it's open access. The exhibition will go on for 3 months or even more. So it will start on April 29th. It will be a good occasion to see some of the wonderful masterpieces of Gandharan art.
And that sounds like a wonderful experience. And so once again, April 29th, 2021 at Berkeley in California. Anybody interested, we could always give you information. Professor, I want to thank you for, first of all, you're connecting with us in Paris, beautiful Paris. I hope you have a wonderful day there. A big thank you for everything you shared with us. And we look forward to having you again, hopefully in person.
Yes, absolutely. It's my pleasure, Mike. Thank you very much. I thank all of you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much for enlightening us on this very fascinating topic. And as we've come to the end of tonight's program, I wanted to provide a little epilogue, as we usually do, by bringing Esmeralda Marikas into the conversation. Are you here, Esmeralda?
I'm here, Mike. I'm here, and we have to express our gratitude to Professor Grigorakou, who made this unique and incredible interview possible. And by the way, her rare archive will be available for everybody to see and study in the Museum of Ancient Greek Technology in Athens in the following months.
So thanks to the professor, we've had this opportunity, if I may add, to have Professor Bopearachchi, which I think is such an amazing service to those of us who are fans of this period in history.
And at the same time, I enjoyed the professor's presentation, and I think he would agree with me in recalling the famous quote of the French author Jean Richepin, "Greece cannot be extinguished."
Well said, well said, well said. So thank you so much, Esmeralda, and you have been listening to a Musical Masterworks special edition here tonight, and with our special distinguished guest, Professor Osmund Bopearachchi. If you need more information, please give us a call, 718-204-8900. I'll be back again in 2 weeks, and until that time, have a wonderful night.
Η συχνότητα του ελληνισμού στη Νέα Υόρκη. Κόσμος FM.